Hello, my name is Anhthu Trang. I'm an undergrad at UTA in the Mind Lab. Today I will be presenting my project entitled Reduced Data Band Functional Connectivity in Adolescents with Epilepsy During Emotional Conflict, MEG study. Epilepsy is a brain disorder marked by repeated seizures that affect about 1% of the population. But for many people with epilepsy, seizures are only part of the problem. Many also experience mental health challenges, especially depression and anxiety, which can greatly reduce quality of life. In fact, many patients report that these emotional difficulties can feel even more burdensome than the seizures themselves. There is growing evidence that epilepsy and related emotional difficulties may arise from shared differences in how brain networks are organized and interact. So rather than one simply causing the other, both may reflect a shared problem in brain network function. This means that studying brain communication early in the course of epilepsy may help us identify problems before years of seizures have had long-term effects. With that in mind, the goal of this study was to examine whether adolescents with epilepsy showed differences in whole brain communication during a task involving emotional conflict compared to adolescents without epilepsy. We predicted that the epilepsy group would show lower brain connectivity during the later stage of processing, after responding to the stimulus, when the brain is evaluating what just happened and preparing for what comes next. To study this, we used the magnetoencephalography, or MEG, which is a brain imaging method that measures very fast brain activity. This is especially useful because it allows us to track when different brain systems are working together during a task, not just where an activity happens. Over here in the emotional words group task, we studied 53 adolescents between the ages of 10 and 20. 28 with epilepsy, and 25 typically developing participants. While in the MEG scanner, they completed an emotional version of the group task. In this task, emotional words are shown on emotional faces. Sometimes the words match the facial expression, and sometimes it did not. When they did not match, the brain had to deal with conflicting emotional information, which places demands on both emotional processing and cognitive control systems. Over here in the source mapping, we then measured how strongly different parts of the brain were working together across the whole brain. We looked at this across different time windows and different time rhythm ranges, and we compared the two groups statistically while accounting for age. We also compared how accurately and how quickly the groups performed the task. What we found was that adolescents with epilepsy showed lower whole brain connectivity than controls in the theta frequency range during the later time window, with a large effect size. This supported our hypothesis that the later stage of processing would be especially affected. Interestingly, this difference was specific to theta activity, which is thought to play an important role in detecting conflict and adjusting behavior. Over here, we also found behavioral differences. The controls showed the expected pattern of responding during emotional conflict, while the epilepsy group showed a less typical pattern, suggesting weaker performance on the task. Overall, these findings suggest that adolescents with epilepsy have disrupted coordination across large-scale brain systems during emotional conflict, especially during the period when the brain is monitoring a response and preparing for the next one. Importantly, these differences appear early in development, which supports the idea that emotional and cognitive difficulties in epilepsy may reflect underlying brain network differences, rather than only the effects of repeated seizures over time. But I want to understand, why does this matter? If we can identify these network differences early, they may help us develop better biomarkers for diagnosis and more personalized treatment approaches. In the long run, understanding these shared brain mechanisms may help improve both medical and mental health outcomes for people with epilepsy. Now, I would like to thank you for your attention and acknowledge my mentors, Dr. King and Dr. Cooper. Thank you so much for watching.